So, with the news that episode 9 will link all of the trilogies together, in other words, connect them, I think that the First Order will reprogram the battle droids to serve them. So, the Resistance will be fighting battle droids and stormtroopers at the same time, which would be absolutely awesome. Now, I think that Qui-Gon and Mace Windu will return as Force ghosts. That is, if Mace Windu is actually dead. Because after all, it says here, Samuel Jackson says Jedi Master Mace Windu is still alive. The reason I think these two characters will return is because they were so integral to the story. So I wouldn't expect like minor characters like Ki-Adi-Mundi and Kit Fisto to return. I mean, they may have played a major role in the Clone Wars animated series, but not in the movies. So, I mean, there's rumours that Qui-Gon may return for the Obi-Wan movie. But the question is, will he return for episode 9 as well? We'll just have to wait and see. So, that being said, I reckon that Luke will want to join the First Order because the First Order are terrorists, just like the Rebel Alliance were terrorists. So, I mean, like, I think he's worried that the New Republic will become an empire, just like the Old Republic became an empire. I mean, that would be a shock twist if Luke joins the First Order, because would that necessarily mean that he turns to the dark side? Or would it mean that he would be like a grey Jedi, like a combination between light and dark? Who knows? We'll just have to wait and see. I think Qui-Gon could appear to Luke and he could say, I watched your father fall down the dark path. I don't want you to do the same. But whether Luke actually heeds his warning is another thing. Changing the subject onto Marvel now and Disney's MCU, as well as the Fox Marvel universe. And basically, I'm not a big fan of Scarlet Witch's movie costumes. I prefer her comic costumes, like especially like this gypsy one. But I must admit, I prefer this leather costume to the one that Scarlet Witch originally had when she first came into the MCU. So, I mean, like, I just don't know why, like, the MCU people didn't let Elizabeth Olsen wear this costume. Like, maybe they will in the future. Who knows? We'll just have to wait and see. But, I mean, I would imagine Elizabeth Olsen would be up for wearing this costume, because she seems like a pretty awesome chick. So, I mean, she's clearly up for showing a bit of leg, because, like, take this picture for example. I mean, see her bare feet. So, basically, right, there's a certain film where Elizabeth Olsen shows her breasts. So I don't think she would think twice about showing some stomach and leg. But there's the whole thing about equality gone crazy and like stuff being suitable for kids. But I mean, they are worried. They are worried that people would complain if she wore this suit in the movies. And to be honest, they shouldn't be worried about that because those people who would complain about this costume, well, basically they need to get a life. So, I mean, even this thing that she wears, like on her head, I think that's like a thing that controls her powers to like stop them going out of control. So who knows if Scarlet Witch ends up getting really, really powerful in the MCU, like meaning like even more powerful than she already is. They may introduce this headpiece. So just close your eyes for a second and visualize Elizabeth Olsen in this costume. God, it would be so fucking awesome. Anyway, I mean, it would be like the same level of awesome as Olivia Munn wearing this Psylocke costume. Like, I mean, that is one of the things that Fox got right. I think Disney would have cocked that up because they would have made her wear a different costume that wasn't as good. So, despite what fans and critics say, I very much enjoyed X-Men Apocalypse. I think it's one of the best films ever, and one of the best entries in the X-Men franchise. I think it's better than Deadpool. Deadpool was overhyped, the villain was rubbish, and it just explored the origins that we already knew anyway. And also, like, the Thor Ragnarok humour is better than the Deadpool humour. But this is Quicksilver's comic costume, which I think is the best costume that he has. So this is the costume that Quicksilver wears in the MCU. And then, of course, we have what Quicksilver wears in Fox's universe. Now, I mean, I think the Fox universe costume is better than the MCU universe costume. And also, like, the Fox Quicksilver is better than the MCU Quicksilver. You can even see that even some cosplayers have better Scarlet Witch costumes than the MCU Scarlet Witch. Like, just look at some of these. Like, I mean, I think there was even a scene in one of the comics where Scarlet Witch does a barefoot gypsy dance. And I would absolutely love if that was a scene in the MCU. So, especially with Elizabeth Olsen's gorgeous feet, that would be awesome. So, this seems to be like a fan's imagining of what Elizabeth would look like in a proper Scarlet Witch costume. Um, to be honest, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver's MCU origins weren't that good. Like, they weren't fully explained. Like, all we really knew is, like, they were mad with Iron Man because they blamed him for their parents' death. Um, but were they actually gypsies uh, in the MCU? Like, I mean, if Scarlet Witch isn't a gypsy yet in the MCU, then there's still the potential that she could become a gypsy in the future. Like, I mean, just visualize like um Elizabeth Olsen wearing this jewellery around her ankles. I mean, that would be so awesome. I mean, don't even get me started on the fact that Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch aren't mutants in the MCU because they're not allowed to use the word mutant in any MCU properties because it breaches copyright because Fox have ownership of the word mutant because obviously Fox making the X-Men films. And I mean, and on top of that, like in the MCU, like Magneto is not Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver's dad, which is absolutely stupid. Like, because like you could just imagine like Ian McKellen playing Elizabeth Olsen's dad, couldn't you? Although I'm not sure it would be believable if Michael Fassbender was playing Elizabeth Olsen's dad. But you've got to remember that the Michael Fassbender version of Magneto, like that was when Magneto was younger, like 1980s onwards.